Good morning everyone, welcome back. Today's video is going to be working on the embellishing of our flower. Previous video we stitched it all down and we spoke about the threads that I selected to do that process. So everything's nice and secure. So I just went rummaging through my bits and bobs in the way of beads, sequins, buttons and things like that, to have a bit of a think about what I'm going to do with the flower. So I just wanted to show you those elements so that if you've got some pieces that you want to start pulling together for your embellishing, you've got a bit of a head start on it. So I went through the beads and I've come up with a range of beads that I think match our design. So I've gone with some reds, some purples, some blue, some greens, and then I found some sequins. So I just thought we'll just have a quick chat about where I think this is going. I'm really loving the red tone in the whole pack, and then my second favorite color would be the blue, then the green, and then the purple. So that's sort of the thinking that I applied to when selecting my beads. So I found these beads here. Now the only thing I'll say is this red bead is probably a little big and you wouldn't use a lot of them. I prefer a smaller bead. So my next challenge is to go shopping. Well, we like that, don't we? And find a smaller red bead that's similar side to these seed beads. They're just a little bit big. They will be handy, but I think I need a smaller one. I saw these long beads. I'm not sure if I'll use them, but I thought I'll just put them in the pack just to have them at hand. I then picked a couple greens. We've got a bit of an olivey green in our print, so I chose one that's more muted and one with a little bit of shimmer. They sort of don't go together, but when you embroider with them, they do go together. It's quite unusual. I use these quite a lot, and sometimes the two tones sort of help something become a little bit 3D. So we'll put that to one side. I picked up some purples and blues next. So this blue here is a very royal blue. Then I went more of a purpley denim blue and then a purple. So I've sort of got a bit of a range there that I think will be quite handy in getting some different tones. And then this color is like a turquoise. So when I looked at this particular piece of fabric here, there's like a turquoisey color, then there's the three greens. So I sort of liked that combination with that fabric. And then I started looking at the blues and the purples, and that's sort of how that came about. And then there's the red fabric. The only thing I think I'm missing, which I sort of don't have, is a hot pink or a even the raspberry pink. So in my shopping, I might add to the list a small red bead, plus have a little look at some purples. I do have some paler purples in my stash that I might end up bringing in to sort of complement that. But at the moment, that's where I'm thinking with the beads. The other thing I spotted was this little pack of sequins. I actually got these from a Sydney company called Sequin Bazaar that has heaps and heaps of sequins. So I grabbed those because there's a pink, a turquoise and the apple green. Whether I use them or not sure yet, but they might be a bit of fun. I then went looking for some red buttons and I found these. These are an unusual little button. They're made from shell that it's been polished up and dyed. So a really pretty shiny little button. I found these online on eBay. If you type in shell buttons and then add a color, you'll be able to pick them up everywhere. They come in different sizes. There's some stars and all sorts. I'll track down where I got those as well and add a link at the bottom. So one side you get a nice shimmer, which I really like, and the other side is more of a muted, you can see the color of the shell. So it's more of a earthy burgundy button. So I'm thinking I'll be using the shiny side, but you never know. Yeah, no, I'll be using the shiny side. They are really going to pop. So whether that is the start of something in the flower, I'm not sure. So I've grabbed those. So we'll put them back in the little bag. So they're going to go towards the project. I also found a little rosette made out of satin ribbon. They're readily available at craft supply stores. So that's got potential. You see where I'm tending towards the red? I think red is going to really come into this. Being, as I just said, red, I grabbed also a crochet cotton in the red. So if I want to do some French knots or some pistol stitch, the red will be here. Now I got a DMC number 8 304, just a nice thickness, not as thick as the blue, but it's a really nice raspberry red that I think will go beautifully with the project. And then in addition, I'm going to use, I've just got lots of little bits of lace out of doilies, so that's the doily edge, and these little elements would be joining the doily together, so I cut them all out to use. So I've got some lacy bits plus the edges from a doily that I've cut apart. So that's the start of building some elements that will go towards embellishing my flower. So when the video starts again, you will see what came of it all. Now, I mentioned in video number 2 that the edge of my piece was starting to fray. So I just wanted to show you my thoughts on what I'm going to do with the edge. I'll just move that over. So in the pack of fabric, there were quite a few pieces that had the animals on it, the deer, the squirrel, and the bear. I did mention that was a polar bear, but upon reflection, polar bears do not live in woodlands. So I'm going to retract that statement and just say that it's a bear, and he happens to be white. So I think that's where I got the whole polar bear thing from. But he's not a polar bear. There is no snow here. So anyway, I'm digressing here. These pieces just didn't really inspire me for the panel itself, because there was this tree, but within the print is all sorts of great colors and spots and dots. So what I did is I pulled them all out, and I've trimmed off the edge of all of them a 1.5 inch piece. So just with my rotary cutter, I just cut straight through a 1.5 piece of fabric. So I had lots of strips. Then I've started pinning them around the side. So if you were making a quilt and you're putting on a binding, you'd probably cut a 2-inch strip. You would lay the piece down. I might just unpin this to show you. You would join them all together to make one big long piece. Let's pin there. Let's get this out. So that's my strip. So if you were doing a quilt, you would have cut heaps and heaps of this width, probably 2 inches, and join them all together if you were doing a segmented binding, or just one piece of fabric to do the whole, finish your whole quilt. You would then put right sides together, and you would stitch this on and then turn it over with a little edge and slip stitch that binding closed. So you would, let's think about this, stitch that on there like that. That's how it is. It's been a while since I've done a binding like this. That's how it goes. So right sides together, raw edge to the side of the raw edge of the panel, and then stitch down, say 1/4 inch in, and then turn it over, iron it, turn it over again, iron it again, and then on the back you would roll that raw edge in, and you would then slip stitch down that edge there to secure your binding. So you can do that if you want on your panel, but just for change and simplicity, I'm cutting bits and pieces out of all of those fabrics that I'm not a great lover of for this project, and I'm going to just pin them down, and then I'm going to slow stitch over the top of them. So it'll be a really rustic way of creating a binding. But before I do that, I want to add texture to the perimeter of my piece. So using these elements from doilies and some lace, I've been cutting little chunks off, and before I put the binding down, I've pinned a little piece there. I've then pinned, let me just take this away. I've then, just for less pins, I've tacked that down with some invisible stitch, so that's not going anywhere. I've then laid my strip of colourful fabric down, and the next one overlaps it, is a blue, and popped a couple pins in. Now you can go through and invisible stitch that to hold it. I probably won't, because that's a lot of work to go right around the perimeter, and then come back through with some form of slow stitch work as well. So I'll see how we go, but that's the thought there. So now I've got a little bit of lace popping out from underneath my binding. Then I've got some doilies and cut them in half, and I'm thinking of just adding them randomly around the edge on top of everything. So it's sort of like 3 layers. You've got your backing, you've then got your fabric, and then you've got your additional pieces. I've lost a pin in the process. I must have used it to secure. So that's what I've done there, the 3 layers. So what I've then done is I've gone around the whole piece and pinned in the fabric, and then every so often popped a little doily piece. That one there I did in that fashion because I've got this clock face here, so I thought that there would look gorgeous. I will probably put something here. I've got a bit of a gap where Jessie's design finishes, or if I decide not to, what I'll do is when I'm couching through there that blue thread, we'll just continue the design to the edge, so that clock will finish there. Then along the top, being at the top of the panel, I sort of did a little treatment here, again like what I just showed you in the center. I've then come around this edge and I've pinned in this panel here. It's going to overlook this little bow heart that's here. Then I've just popped a random piece in under the binding there that will come out. I keep sliding this along. I've then added another one there. Okay, and then I started working on this corner and layering up quite a few pieces as well as a long piece there. Now the reason I've done that is this plant or tree in the corner here, I've couched down a stem. So what I end up doing is using the twine that I showed you in the first video that was like a rope. I've used that for the main stem, and then I've used my ball of twine and couched down all of these little branches. So I just pinned them all first, so it was heaps of pins here, and then couched them all down, and then the thicker twine met them all in under this doily, and that became the trunk of the tree, and these were the branches of the tree. I hope that makes sense. And then I had, with this junction here, it looked okay, but it did look a little bit primitive. So then I used the doily just to disguise the fact that this was my joining point for these 6 pieces of twine that are all coming into here and all secured with the trunk coming down. So that's what I did there. Now that couching, if you go back a video, you'll be able to see just the couching stitch and how I did the stem of the flower and the petals. So same principle there. So as we come down to the bottom here, I'm thinking along the lines of, I've got this tree, we've got a swan sitting here. So I started building up quite a lot of texture here. So there's like a half doily here, a full motif here, there's a little piece of lace in there, another half doily tucked in there, then that lace that I've used in a couple spots already is coming along. So my theory is, in this corner we're creating It's a bit all over the place here. We're creating a garden bed. So I think there'll be a lot of embroidery happen here, and this is my floor, my ground, my base that will allow me to come up to do some embroidery over the swan. So she's sitting in there, which leads me to the center of the bottom of the piece. So here's my flower stem coming down, and I had this piece of lace from a tablecloth. So I've stitched it down just with some invisible little stitches just to hold it there so that I didn't have the pins, but I left it loose because I'm coming along the bottom here securing this binding. So I need to be able to get in there, and I want the piece sort of to dangle out the bottom of my work. And that will happen a little bit more too with some more elements, because this is going to be a wall hanging. So when it's hanging on the wall, I want plenty of dangly bits hanging down here in this space. So I've started allowing pieces to pop off the bottom, and then there'll probably be even more come as a treatment underneath that whole piece. So in my stash of treasures to go with this project, if I come across any lace that has fringing or is a decorative what's the word, scalloped edge, I'll just pop it in the pack just to keep it with the piece, because I'll do a treatment along the bottom like a fringe, a layered lace fringe. So that will come at a later date. So we're coming back up the side. We're at this corner. I didn't do anything real elaborate here because this reel of cotton here sort of doesn't need anything covering it, because what I'm thinking is using the twine is we'll make it a reel of twine, so it looks like string will be going around that bobbin. So that's my thoughts there, unless I come up with something else. And I can always, if I decide to embellish the corner some more, I can always add more pieces so that the bobbin is sitting behind something, but that'll happen when it happens. So that's my thoughts there in that corner. So we're coming up the side again, and another piece of lace tucked in under the binding, a random little motif snippet there. This is a rectangle that I've put on the diamond, and that's just going to sit there. I might tack it down but leave it flap a little bit so that whatever I decide to do with the swan's back here, I can either put it under or over whatever the treatment is there. Then that sort of sets up a corner for the little house. Whoops, sets up the corner of the little house, and we're back to where we started. Okay, so let me just get myself repositioned here. So what I'll do now is I'll stop the video, and when it restarts, I'll come back and show you this all stitched down all the way around. That'll stop our fraying, and I will have started doing some embellishing of the flower. And hopefully in my travels, I would have picked up some more pinky beads and some small red beads, and they'll be starting to be worked into the center. Okay, everyone, I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye. Hello, everyone. I'm back with an update on my stitching so far. So what I've done is, I believe I've finished my flower in the center. So after we last spoke, we had attached the fabric just by a little overcast stitch. I then went back through the piece, if I bring that up closer, and where Jessie had made, I might use my needle as a pointer, where Jessie had made these little etching marks in the blue, I overstitched them in the red cotton. Then in addition, wherever I had some of Jessie's lines showing from underneath where I'd put the piece of fabric. So for example, the piece of fabric went on, but I could still see her line underneath because my fabric didn't fully cover it. So I just started stitching over that with some red, and where I got to the end and it disappeared back in under that fabric, I put a little X, which then led me to this little spray coming outside her flower, which sort of mimicked what I was doing in there. So if I move around a little bit further, there's another red line coming along. Then in the petal itself, I added this line and the little X. And then as I worked around the flower, I started another one out here with the little X. So as I sort of worked around the full image of the flower, I just started putting these little lines in addition. They sort of remind me of stamens that would come out from the flower, and maybe there was some pollen on the end here. Sort of that sort of thinking was what popped into my mind. So once I'd done those curves, I started then stitching 3 little beads from the full range in on each stamen. So there's the little blue ones there, the little green ones here. I then put the paler green down here, just 3 little beads, and some purple ones over here. This one is still needing some. I'm thinking they'll be the pink beads when I manage to get some when I go shopping for supplies. Now I'll just bring you to the center here. I did a few different things here. I first of all put down a little doily snippet from inside a doily that has lots of motifs. This would be the little motif that would join. Let me grab one to show you. That would join the bigger ones. So for example, it was that. Okay, so then a bigger motif like this would attach to it, and then it'd be another one, and away you go to create your doily. So the first thing I did was stitch that down. I don't know if you can see, but then I went around. Where's my camera? Let's get this. Whoop. Gosh, goodness me. There we go. Then in around that doily, I did a red little bullion stitch. You can't really see it, but it just scooted in little jumps around the doily to put a pop of red through the center of the doily. Then I added the little clusters of the beads and then the little satin rosette. And then around the back of it, I tucked in the little timber embellishments there. So that's really giving it a nice 3D effect to the piece and starting to build up the center of that flower. So that's the center, I believe, finished. I don't think I'll put any more stitches in there because I don't think you'd see them on top of the fabric that we added because it's so busy. So I believe my flower is finished. The next thing I did is I had this doily to the side that was just sitting as a random piece added. So before I mentioned that we were bringing the stitches over that doily, well, I ended up embellishing the doily with one of those red buttons. I did 3 lazy daisy stitches, but I kept them really loose and then popped a little stitch at the top of each loop just to pin it down so that it would keep its nice open shape. And then on this side of the doily, the button, I just did 3 pistol stitches just to give it a little feature. I had thought of doing a grub stitch all the way around here, but I haven't yet. I'm sort of liking what I've done there so far. Now, I then started working on the leaves. So this leaf, I believe, is completed. I couched in some tapestry yarn or wool around the outer edge, and then I satin stitched the lines that Jessie had created through the center of this leaf and down through the very center. I then came back with some seed stitch, and my plan was to do the whole leaf, but I sort of stopped once I'd done the center, and I sort of like it where it's just a bit of a hint of color through the center and leaving this all open. So I'm pretty happy with the way that leaf came to be. I'll just move to the next leaf, which I'm still working on. I might just drop the fabric back a bit. Okay, so I've added the green edge as with the other one. I've done some of the veins. I've still got to come down this side in the satin stitch. I then, before I do the seed stitch, I decided to put this little bit of lace through the center of the leaf. So it's like a little 3D element that'll go through the center. And then what I'm thinking is I will continue the seed stitch up through this side, just that side. So we'll see how that looks once I do it. Whether I need some more on the other side, I'm thinking I won't, because this lace will be the little feature. And once they're satin stitched in, I think that'll be enough, but I'm not sure. I might end up embellishing that lace somehow, whether I add some beads or some little pistol stitches, just not sure how that'll go, but that's my thinking on the big leaf. It's going to be a little bit more decorative and completely different to the this smaller leaf here. So what else did I start doing? Oh, okay, in around the background of everything, if I bring that up to the camera, you'll see a red looking flower here. Now it's got a tone of red under it which shouldn't be there, because that's the pen I used to draw it, and there's another one here drawn ready. So what I did is, when I was getting out those timber embellishments, I found this little flower. So my thought was to draw around it with the pen, and then couch around it with some cotton, and on the exterior areas of all of the designs do a heap of seed stitch. So that's what I've done there. I've seed stitched in behind there, down that side of the leaf, and then I'm working my way around the side of the flower. So we're coming up there, and that's sort of where I've got to. So that whole zone through there has been seed stitched, and I'm really happy with the way that's come up. It's like pushing the background further back, but we got these subtle little floral indents or quilted look in around there. It sort of reminds me of when you make a big quilt and then you overstitch some form of feather design or scrolls. It gives you that quilted image, but there's also a design within that quilting. So that's sort of the effect there that I was trying to achieve. I've then started doing a little bit of seed stitch in there. That sort of finishes that background up in there. I've then come up the side of the flower and the house, and I've stopped there. So from a stitching process, I've pretty much gone through there, round the stem, and working my way up here. So that zone through the center there is now completed. I'm 100% sure, I'm pretty sure, yes, I'm 100% sure they will continue the seed stitch pretty much everywhere. It'll be a massive undertaking, but I think it'll be worth it. Whether I change colors as I go, I'm not sure, or I'll stay with just the cream calico tones, not 100% sure. So I'll just show you the threads that I've used so far in this area. Now I've got the raspberry red. It's a DMC crochet cotton number 8. They're all number 8s, these next few I'm going to show you. So the color number is a 304. That's what I used with the stamens out of the flower. Okay, then the leaves, the satin stitch within the leaf is 469, also a number 8 crochet cotton. So it's a real olive tone, and it looked really pretty over the tapestry wool yarn. So that's lying over that. Okay, this wool, when I was at an op shop, I picked up for, I think it was like $6, a tapestry kit that no one had completed. It was like a long stitch kit. They were pretty big in the 90s, and all of the yarn was on one of those cards where there's a heap of holes and the yarn hangs off of it. So I've salvaged all of the yarn and just wrapped it into a little bobbin holder here, and thought, well, one day I'll use it, and today's the day. So it had this beautiful olive, soft olive green. So that's what I've couched around the leaf. So it's a tapestry yarn from an old kit. And then over the top was this crochet. Then inside the leaf, the seed stitch is this one, 581. So it's a real fresh green. So the three of them together are completely different greens, but they sort of complement each other. So that's the seed stitch in the petals. That's around the outside of the leaf, not petals, the leaves, and then couched with this colour over the top. So that's the yarns I've used so far. Now, I did mention the blue for the flower was this crochet cotton. Well, I found the label. So I'll give you a little bit more information. It's a soft crochet or knitting yarn, 4-ply. It's a Sullivan brand, which is an Australian company. So that's what I've used, and the colour is denim. Okay. So that is the Jessie stitching. Wherever Jessie has drawn, and I want to maintain that blue, that's what I'm using that for. Okay, what else have I done so far? I've just going back to the little indented flower, the quilted flower, which I've drawn a couple around the place in anticipation that there'll be one go there. Around the top of the swan, I sort of did a couple there, and around the back of the swan. So just ready to have seed stitching. I've even drawn one on her wing, whether that happens or not, but it's just to remind me that I'll do quite an elaborate feature where the joint of her wing would meet her body. It's just a perfect place to sort of create a bit of a cluster of something. So there'll definitely be lots of those red flowers that I've drawn pop up in the background of our swan. Now I'll just turn this around a little bit so that it's the right way. Okay, now in the process of drawing that, I pulled out a snippet of olive fabric that I had from years gone by quilts. So I've got these little offcuts, and I actually cut out a flower using that shape. So I literally just drew that on the back and then cut it out. So now I have a olive flower that matches the little sketched flower on the piece. So it just helps bring design together when you've got the same flower but used in different ways, so it sort of pops up around the place. What I'm thinking with this flower when I did it was actually popping it somehow connected to this leaf, but I'm not sure yet how that'll fit in, whether it'll be appliqued on or not. But I've cut it out and it's ready to go. So even if I don't use it on this leaf, because it is the green, I might use it somewhere else. So I've just cut it out just to keep it around in my stash, just to sort of prompt me to have a little think about it. So not sure where that'll end up. And even if I'll stay with the green, I might go back to my fabrics and pick a fabric to cut a little flower out. Okay, what else have I done since? Oh, I've stitched the edges down. So I went around the whole piece and I stitched down the lace and the turned over fabric, and I just used a little overcast stitch at the moment, and I just used cotton. I haven't yet come back through and stitched any slow stitch furrow on it to decorate it. I'm just not sure if I will yet. We'll see. I sort of think I'll work out all the embellishments in the way of lace snippets first, and then whatever space is left, there might be a little bit of burrow stitching, and then there might be more lace. So I'm not going to spend my time doing that just yet, because the edge might evolve in many ways, but at least now it's secure. It's the panel is not going to fray. That piece there, I haven't cut it yet. It'll probably just turn over and be tacked on the back. So all the way around, it's all nice and secure, and it's not going anywhere. So that was a mammoth tart. That took probably a day in total in time. By the time I repinned it, repositioned it, made sure it was all even, and then slip stitched it down. Okay, well worth the effort, because now my piece feels nice and secure and is not going to sort of break down as I work the different elements onto it. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is I ended up putting a backing fabric on it, some wadding, just some cotton wadding. I'm not sure if I mentioned this earlier in the piece, but I found that this is just printed on like a calico homespun fabric, and I found it quite hard to hold in my hand because it was so thin. By putting this little bit of wadding on the back, it just gives the piece a little bit more texture. It's starting to feel a bit like a lightweight blanket, and it makes it a little easier to hold in your hands. So especially if you're getting a bit of joint pain, if fabric's very fine, it's very hard to hold them. So by putting that little bit of backing fabric, and you could use felt, you could use an old blanket, you could use a Pellin, which is a synthetic product. I tend not to use Pellin if I can avoid it, because I find as the needle goes through the Pellin, there's this subtle scratchiness I feel. It might be just me, but it's like the metal needle going through a synthetic thread. It just doesn't slide smoothly. So I'm a really big fan of these cotton waddings that you can pick up at quilt shops. They're not cheap. They're definitely not a bargain price, but if your work is something you want to keep for a while and you're going to work on it for a while, it's definitely worth the investment of getting a really nice backing. But felt would also do the trick, and that's very inexpensive to buy a piece of felt by the meter. Okay, so I think that's all I had on my little list to show you. We've talked about the backing fabric, the treatments on the leaves, how the little timber flower came to be here and where it may pop up elsewhere, especially around the swan, and then the start of the seed stitch in the background, which to be honest is going to be a mammoth task, but I think it'll be worth it. I think it's really going to pull the piece together at the end. What was the other thing I wanted to mention? Pretty much what I'm going to do next, once I finish probably the seed stitch a little bit more around the flower, around the top here, then I know that this center, I can move away from it. I'm going to move then to our tree. So I've been thinking a little bit about these leaves. So prior video, I mentioned that I had couched on the string and the big center stamen here, which was a slightly thicker product. So that was the string and that was the stem. So they're all in position and they all came to a junction point here, which this doily covered, and that's all secure. So now I've got to think about these leaves, and I'm going to do a similar thing where I did with the petals. So I cut out the shape and then stitch it down and then embellish from there. The only other thought I've got at this stage is I might wind up the entire tree, a vine. I'm not sure what I will use. I'm thinking beads, but I think it'll be a combination of bits and pieces. I had the idea, I'm in the process of doing a bit of gardening. The weather in Australia at the moment, it's gone from the hot summer and it's slowly changing into autumn. It's still a little early for autumn, being that it's February, but the last week with this rain around, it's been quite pleasant. So I've got out in the garden, and some of my trees and shrubs have got this vine that's popped up from nowhere. It's a real rainforest vine, and it's winding its way up everything. It's just amazing how this thing has gone, and it just reminded me of this little tree. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to create a vine that will come from the bottom where the tree comes into my lacy garden here, and it will wind its way up, and it will have its own independent leaves as well to the tree. So that'll be the next video, which will be part of our little series here. It'll be this tree. So I'll leave it at that because I believe I have got the flower to where I want it. And like I said, it's turned out to be a bit of a colour wheel of fabrics, and it sort of has led to the creation of the leaf. So I shall leave it at that, and next time you see me, there'll be an update on the leaf and how that went. There'll be a lot more seed stitch around, and I will have started working on the tree over in this corner, and I'm really looking forward to the actual corner because this will be a heap of flowers. that will come across the bottom of the swan. So that's where we are at. Okay, everyone, thank you for joining me on this update, and I will see you all soon. Bye-bye.